Raymond Verheijen, welcome to Bendiksen Airways.
Thank you, Alexander. Good to see you again.
Thanks, the same to you. You're the founder and leader of Football Coach Evolution. Could you just briefly tell us what that is?
Football Coach Evolution is an organization that I developed ever since I would say 2010. And what we do is coach education all around the world. Initially in person, so I was traveling for 200 days a year until COVID, and then like many other people, you have time to reflect and you wonder what you have been doing for 10 years. So then obviously we also started to do more online stuff. So now these days it's more like a combination and less traveling. And we built partnerships on all the continents. So every year I travel to each continent at least once, and then we do coach education. And besides that, but that is more informal and behind the scenes for me to stay in touch with, let's say, the working floor, is that I do consultancy with clubs and organizations and coaches sometimes individually. Um, but that is something that, like I said, I do behind the scenes. Um, the main thing is the coach education, and I also try to write a book, let's say every year or once every 2 years, um, because thanks to all those courses that I deliver and all the conversations that I have with people, and because I also surrounded myself by with a group of let's say 15 experts in all kind of areas of expertise. Um, yeah, we have developed a lot of new references, new knowledge, where we translate knowledge from outside football into the football context in football language. And so that is also something that keeps me busy.
Yeah. So you've also been coaching or have at least been an assistant coach for a lot of top clubs and also national teams. Been to several World Cups, Euros. How do you how has your development been from starting or after you finished playing yourself and until now? How's the development been for you, and why did you come to start your own coach education?
Well, initially, like every young boy, you want to become professional player, and it looked like I was on my way to become one. Not a top one, but at least make your profession of your hobby. But then I got injured when I was playing for the Dutch national under 17 team. I started to develop some problems with my hips in particular. So then I had to stop, and then at that moment, hey, your world falls apart. But on hindsight, like I always say, this disadvantage developed into an advantage because it allowed me to get my coaching licenses at a relatively young age, and I also decided to go to university to study exercise physiology and sport psychology. And then my university thesis I developed it into a book. And luckily, this book, also because in those years there was nothing else. So in the land of the blind, one eye is king. That book became the book in the Dutch coaching courses of the Dutch FA, the KNVB. And my coach with the Dutch national team under 17 in the late 80s. He then gave me my first job later on at the Dutch FA. So then I became also the instructor with the pro license and the A license, etc. And in my first group that I had to educate about periodization, was a special group with Ruud Gullit, Frank Rijkaard, Johan Neeskens, Marco van Basten, Ruud Krol, and yeah, and that felt very natural. So I remember that there was no real hesitance from my side. So and then Frank Rijkaard, who was one of the students, he became the national team coach. So then I started to work as an assistant, specialized in the area of periodization, with the Dutch national team when I was 25, I think, which on hindsight is a little bit young, but yeah, it was a great head start. And yeah, then from then on, between 1998, I think, and 2012, something like that, um, I went to 4 World Cups and 4 Euros, with the Netherlands, with Russia, with Korea. I work with Argentina, and some other countries. I also worked with some of the clubs, with Barcelona, Manchester City, Chelsea. Um, but then at some point, and I think that the moment was in 2009 at Manchester City, when I reached the point that I thought, um, yeah, this environment is not satisfying me anymore. It's not challenging me anymore. Um, and partly it has to do with the fact that if you have done something numerous times, it's not new to you anymore. So that also plays a role, of course. But I am somebody who wants, I want to be challenged, uh, and I want to stretch boundaries also in my thinking. Um, so at some point, I think it was 2009 or 2010, I basically reached a point where I thought, I want to do something else. And so that was the moment that I started with Football Coach Evolution. Um, and I started to consult coaches, clubs, and to educate coaches. And yeah, that was basically the starting point of a new chapter. And yeah, now we are here today. Yeah.
Yeah. So, with everything you saw at the top level, uh, how has that influenced your coach education, and how much has changed since you started with KNVB back in '98?
Well, yeah, one of the things that probably contributed to the fact that I wanted to do something else is the fact that even when you are at working at the highest level, that often the level of thinking, so rational discourse between people and critical thinking, is relatively low. And that sound may be strange, but unfortunately, it is the case. Even today, what you see in the football world in general and at the highest level in particular is that a lot of people are thinking and acting, coaching, based on their subjective opinion, based on their past experiences, based on their subjective preferences or emotional associations with something. But if you would ask them, why are you doing what you're doing? Yeah, especially at the highest level, you would expect that somebody can put his money where his mouth is and can substantiate thoughts or can substantiate decisions or coaching, etc. And that is the disappointing thing, that either people answer that they do things because they do things, or because they have also always done things like that, or they present arguments that might make sense for that person, but are easily falsifiable, if you understand what I mean. Yeah, so somebody presents his arguments, and then you either identify an inconsistency in that argument, or something is just not correct. So based on logical reasoning, you can falsify it, or based on facts. Yeah, so that is pretty disappointing. And um, what you often see is that a lot of football coaches, when it's about football, so the sport itself, so not about all the scientific areas that they also have to deal with, but the analysis and the coaching of the sport itself, is that it is pretty much based on, like I said, their opinions. And one of the main reasons is that these coaches have been, for example, player in the past. So they have experienced all kind of things. And when they were not a player, they probably start coaching at an early age. So then they have a long coaching career already. So they have a lot of coaching experiences. And the problem in life in general, but in the football world in this case in particular, is that people think that experience is the same as knowledge, or that experience results in knowledge. And that has to do, that thinking mistake has to do with the fact that a lot of people do not understand the differences between experience and knowledge. Experience is you perceiving something. So you see something, or you hear something, or you smell something, or you taste something, or you feel something. You have five senses. So basically you collect sensory data, and then based on the information that is stored in your brain, you interpret the sensory data. So then you have a first impression of what you are experiencing. And what a lot of people do is that they experience something, then they interpret the experience. So they have a first impression, and then they store this first impression in their brain, in their memory, as if it is the truth. Yes. But just imagine that I meet you, for example, for the first time. Well, in the first meeting with you, I am experiencing you. So I am collecting sensory data. I am seeing things, I am hearing things, etc. But if I meet you for 30 minutes or 1 hour, it is impossible for me to experience you and collect information about you that gives me a complete picture of you. So I will have a first impression of you, but it is impossible that that first impression is going to be complete. Yes, I will only see part of you, but not the whole Alexander, only part. And the second problem, besides the fact that my first impression is going to be incomplete, the small part of you that I do experience, it is almost impossible that I 100% correctly interpret the part of you that I experience. So besides the fact that my first impression of you is going to be incomplete, the part that I do experience is probably going to be interpreted more or less incorrect. So, and that is why first impressions of experiences are often incomplete and incorrect. Now, but if you are aware of that, that's not a problem. But most people are not aware of that. They take their first impression as the truth. And then when I then meet you for the second time, yes, what do a lot of people do? They are now experiencing you, interacting with you through the glasses of the first experience. So the first experience of you is going to be the filter through which they're going to experience you the second time. And then a lot of people in the second meeting with you, they are going to look for confirmation of their first impression. So they are going to look for confirmation of the incomplete and incorrect first impression of you. And that is how you gradually develop illusions in your brain about the world around you. Now, the same thing happens when somebody is a player and that player is experiencing coaches and situations, and that player is then interpreting all these situations. And as a result, the player is accumulating all these illusions in his brain. And then this player becomes a coach. And then that former player is going to coach based on all those incomplete and incorrect interpretations of past experiences. Now, and what in reality should happen, but that is only possible if you educate coaches about this, is that if I have a first impression of you, first of all, I should understand that it is incomplete and incorrect. And then secondly, if I meet you the second time, I should try to falsify my first impression of you. So I should look in my second meeting, I should try to make my impression of you more complete. And my interpretation of you in the first meeting, I should try to falsify that in the second meeting with you. So I should look for information that falsifies my first impression of you, so that my second impression will be more complete and more correct. And then the third impression and the fourth impression and the fifth impression. And then gradually I develop a more reliable picture of you. And the same should happen with all your other experiences in life or in coaching. So experience in football and when you are coaching is only helpful if you consistently try to falsify your impressions. And then gradually your initial subjective interpretation becomes a more objective explanation. If that is how you treat your experience, then experience is an advantage. Yeah. But 99.9% of the people, they treat their first impression as the truth, and it becomes their starting point of reasoning in the future. And then you develop all these illusions and thinking mistakes. Now, and that is symptomatic in the football world, so that instead of people developing objective knowledge, they are coaching and thinking based on subjective, incorrect, incomplete interpretations of experiences. Yeah, and then everything that you see in the football world is like a self-fulfilling prophecy based on what I just explained.
So what would you say is the goal of FCE?
First of all, educate people about objective knowledge. Yeah, so that is the one thing I said. And also educating, teaching coaches what critical thinking means. And that critical thinking is not, first of all, being critical about somebody else or something else, but that you, first of all, should be critical about yourself. And that you should critically evaluate and try to falsify your own thinking and your own behavior and your own coaching. So those are the two things, educating objective knowledge and teaching people what critical thinking means, and in particular in relation to yourself.
Yeah. Is it a goal, or do you think it could have a global impact?
Now, with respect to global impact, I always say that my objective is not to change the football world, because I think that's a mission impossible. It is too many people who are suffering from the problems that I just described. And that number of people is so big that you will never ever change that. So I see football coach evolution more as a opportunity, a platform or a community for coaches who understand, first of all, what I just explained, and who also think, hey, that is how I want to develop myself. And for those coaches, we offer the opportunity to develop themselves further. And with respect to everybody else outside that circle, yeah, it is what it is. And I'm not going to try to change that.
You speak often about, like you said now, experience versus knowledge. Do you also say something about going from knowledge to competence and how to use the knowledge?
Yeah. Yeah, what is important in that context, of course, when you talk about experience and knowledge and studying, educating, what is important, of course, is that you put it or that you keep it in perspective. So that's why your question is important, because studying and storing knowledge in your brain, in your memory, is of course not an objective in itself. The knowledge, the information that you store in your brain is guiding, in particular, your unconscious thinking. Without going into too much detail, but a lot of people think that thinking is a conscious thing, because conscious thinking is the only thinking they're conscious of. And as a result, they think that that is the only thinking because it's the only thinking they're conscious of. But if you analyze, then you will find out that thinking is, first of all, an unconscious process. If you have a eureka moment, you become conscious of a great idea, but that idea is the result of unconscious thinking, connecting the dots. If you connect dots, that is happening at the unconscious level, for example. So thinking is, first of all, an unconscious process guided by the information that is stored in your brain. So the more knowledge you have stored in your brain, and the higher the quality of your knowledge, so the more objective and reliable that knowledge, the higher the quality of your unconscious thinking, which in turn, that unconscious thinking is guiding your coach actions. And that is the application that you are referring to. So studying means increasing the amount of knowledge stored in your brain and increasing the quality of the knowledge stored in your brain. And then as a result, that higher quality knowledge is going to create higher quality unconscious thinking and higher quality coach actions. And then you still have no guarantee, because then still you can be incompetent or unsuccessful. So there are no guarantees, but at least you have increased the chance of higher quality, competent coach actions. And if you go back to what I said at the beginning, if you only have incomplete and incorrect interpretations of experiences stored in your brain, then that low quality information is guiding your unconscious thinking and guiding your coach actions. And then you have a smaller chance of performing competent coach actions.
FC was used, or was first called the World Football Academy, but now it's called Football Coach Evolution. And as I understand it, evolution, or the theory of evolution, is central in developing players. Can you speak a bit about how you see the theory of evolution with regards to going from um, incompetent players to competent players and how you use it in coaching?
Yeah, initially we started with World Football Academy, and then I changed because the word academy is more like a school, and while in reality, what we try to do is to develop coaches who understand that they should be lifelong students of the game, and so basically you should consistently evaluate or evolve yourself from day to day and season to season. So then that is why I changed to evolution. And with respect to your question about using the principles of evolution in player development, if you study human evolution or the evolution that has taken place on our planet, then what you see is that consciousness was not there from the beginning. And so human beings evolved, but consciousness was initially not there. So that means that human beings, Homo sapiens and other variants of that, they became more and more competent over time without the help of consciousness and conscious thoughts. So initially, there was competence without consciousness. And then at some point, consciousness was the product of evolution. So basically, consciousness was one of the competencies that resulted or that developed during the evolution. Because a lot of people think that consciousness is the reason for evolution. So it is the cause of evolution. But in reality, consciousness is the effect, the consequence of evolution. It is one of the competencies that evolved. So initially there was competence without consciousness, and then later there was competence with consciousness, because consciousness was one of the competencies. And if that is how human beings have evolved in general, then that is also how human beings evolve in the football context. Yes. So that is basically how I have integrated or benefited from studying human evolution to make player development more purposeful and to make it concrete in the football context. Not only our conscious or not only our thinking is an unconscious process. Everything that a human being does is unconscious. And every now and then we become conscious of it. And sometimes our conscious thoughts influence what we do. But that is something else than our consciousness controlling what we do. And because a lot of people, they think that they have conscious control over what they do. Yeah, but that is an illusion. And that's the illusion of free will or the illusion of conscious control. Because if everybody who's listening or watching right now, if that person would ask him or herself, how many actions did I perform already today from the moment that you wake up till right now? And obviously that depends on what time of the day you listen to this podcast. But every human being every day is performing thousands and thousands of small and bigger actions. And more than 95% of those actions are performed on automatic pilot, unconsciously. And less than 5% of the things we do on a daily basis, we are conscious of. And another example is that maybe people who are listening, that they remember that they have been in a situation that they had coached a game in the evening, and then after that game you drive home, and you are consciously reflecting on the game and all the chances that you missed. But in the meantime, you are driving the car. And then at some point you think, hey, I'm driving a car for 30 minutes. So apparently your unconscious brain is able to drive a car without consciousness assisting you. And that is because you have driven that road already thousands of times. So, and as you probably know, there are many different other ways that you can, practical examples that you can use to demonstrate that our behavior is unconscious. And that is also true in football. Because in most game situations, there is hardly any space and time. So most football actions have to be performed in a split second, like a reflex. So most football actions are performed without conscious thoughts being involved. So to cut the long story short, human behavior in general and football actions in particular are unconscious processes. And every now and then consciousness can be involved, yes, but consciousness is not in charge. For example, if I would ask you, hey, Alexander, what is going to be your next conscious thought? Yeah, you don't know. Yeah, because your next conscious thought is going to be as much of a surprise as my next words. You don't know. And somebody who says, I already know what my next conscious thought will be, should understand that that person is then already having that conscious thought right now. And then the question is, where did that conscious thought come from? You see?
Yeah.
So, first of all, you don't know what your next conscious thought will be because your conscious thoughts pop up spontaneously. That is also the problem when you are laying in your bed at 2 a.m. in the night and you want to sleep, but these conscious thoughts keep you awake. If you had been in charge of your conscious thoughts, you just stop having conscious thoughts and you sleep. But we all know that that is not possible. We don't have control over our conscious thoughts. And then secondly, when you have conscious thoughts, those conscious thoughts are not in charge of your actions. And then the classic example I always use is that if you are standing at the buffet and then you see a nice cake, your impulse is that you want to take the cake. And then you have this conscious thought like, oh, I should take fruit because I have to lose weight. Well, if your conscious thoughts are in charge of your actions, then 10 out of 10 times you will take the fruit, right? But we have all been in situations that you have the conscious thought, I have to lose weight, I should take the fruit, and then you still take the cake. Yes? And more extreme examples are people who have bad habits or addictions. They are consciously aware that they should not smoke, but they keep smoking. So that is how little control your conscious thoughts have. Yeah. So first of all, you are not in charge of your conscious thoughts. They just pop up. Yeah, and you will remember next time at 2 a.m. in the night when you want to sleep or when you do meditation. Because if you meditate, you don't want to have conscious thoughts, right? You want to have your conscious attention directed, for example, to your breathing. But if you have control, then for 1 hour, your conscious attention will be focused on your breathing. But we all know that within 10 seconds, you will have conscious thoughts that you don't want. That's how much control you have.
Yeah.
Yes? And those conscious thoughts then also do not control your actions, but they might influence your action. That's true. So to go back to your question, yes, consciousness is one of the competencies that evolved in human evolution. But consciousness is popping up spontaneously, and it is not controlling your behavior, your actions. That means that when you are focusing on player development, so if you are coaching football players, you are basically conditioning the unconscious brain of your player. You are coaching players who are behaving based on their unconscious brain. Yes. And obviously, you in one of your previous podcasts, you spoke about free will, and then the discussion was about yes, in these you can use these situations, and they suggest that there is no free will. But if you look at those situations, then they suggest that there is free will. But what should have happened in that conversation is that you zoom out further and that you approach it more fundamentally and more philosophically, like I just tried to do in a nutshell. Because in all the situations that you discussed in that podcast, in all those situations, you can say, do you know what your next conscious thought will be? Yes. And if you are standing at the buffet and you want to lose weight, will you take fruit 10 out of 10 times? Or if you smoke and then you have the conscious thought, I should stop smoking because otherwise I will get lung cancer, will you now stop smoking? You see? So in any of those situations, you can use those examples to prove that you still don't have free will. And that consciousness only is an influence on your behavior, but not a control of your behavior. So then when you talk about player development, coaches should not approach their players as if they have conscious control. Because coaches often say to a player, hey, why did you do A? Why did you not do B? So basically they say, hey, why did your unconscious brain do A? And why did your unconscious brain not do B? Do you understand how silly that question is? Based on hopefully what I've explained in the last 5 minutes. So what coaches in reality should do, and also what parents should do when they raise their children, is that first of all, you should design situations to allow players to practice and develop the desired habits, situation, action patterns. So in this game situation, this is the desired interaction, passing. But in this game situation, this is the desired interaction, to interact with that situation. For example, pressing or dribbling or shooting or whatever. So by designing training situations, you help players to develop unconscious habits, unconscious situation action patterns. That is let's say, non-verbal way of coaching, situation coaching, designing situations. And then you have a more verbal way of coaching that's called reference coaching. And that is asking players questions. So not telling players something, but asking players questions to make them reflect on the behavior that they expressed. So asking them questions to make them reflect on how they interacted 10 seconds ago, or when you look at a video, how they interacted yesterday in the game with certain situations. And those are two ways that you can help players condition their unconscious brain. Situation coaching, so create training situations to develop the desired situation action patterns, habits. And reference coaching by asking them questions to make them reflect on their own behavior so that they store knowledge about their own behavior. So that hopefully in the future, this knowledge, this self-awareness will guide their unconscious football actions so that you increase the chance, again, no guarantee, that you increase the chance of more competent unconscious football actions.
Yeah.
So that is how you can use human evolution. That was your question. How you can use human evolution in the context of player development. And by the
Given
way,
what
what you see,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but and what you saw is that for the last 10 minutes, I have been talking, right? And for the last 10 minutes, or let me put it this way, the reason why it took 10 minutes is because I am not just answering your question, but I am putting my money where my mouth is, if you understand what I mean. First of all, I am explaining this, then I'm explaining this, and then I'm explaining this. So I create building blocks, and then I use those building blocks to explain it in a football context. So first I am introducing explanatory theory, and then I am using that explanatory theory to answer your question, rather than immediately answering your question without explanation. And obviously it takes 10 or 15 minutes. Yeah, and if people cannot handle that, they should understand that that says something about their brain and not about my explanations. But because I first introduce explanatory theory, my arguments, I give now people the opportunity to evaluate my arguments. And as a result, they can now evaluate my conclusions, my answer to your question. If I would immediately answer your question without arguments, without explanatory theory, my answer would be 1 minute, which might be very comfortable for people who are listening. But if I answer in 1 minute without arguments, then now people cannot evaluate my answer. So now my answer sounds my opinion.
Yeah.
You see? And that is also an example of what I try to teach in the courses, that if somebody says something without arguments, it is a waste of time. Because if somebody is only answering your question, but is not substantiating it, you cannot evaluate the answer. So now you have no tools to determine whether you can trust the answer or not.
Given what you explained there, how would you say this, or does this differ when you coach during sessions and during games?
Yes, because when you are coaching in action, yes, the problem is that players are in the heat of the moment and they might not have the overview of what actually happened in the game situation. While if they look at video, they have more information to reflect on and to answer and to learn. So the disadvantage of coaching in the moment is that players have less information available to reflect and answer questions. The advantage is that if you make them reflect and they draw conclusions, that they can immediately apply it again and experiment with it. And so there are disadvantages and advantages, because if you are in a video session, they have more information. So there is a bigger chance that if you ask questions, that they answer correctly and that they learn more from it. but they cannot immediately apply it and experiment with it. So basically, it depends on what your objective is. If your objective is to develop better habits, situation, action patterns, then it is better to coach in the heat of the moment. Because then, although they have less information to learn, they can immediately practice again. If your objective is to help them develop more knowledge, then it's better to have video sessions, because then they need more reliable information to draw more reliable conclusions and to store more reliable self-knowledge, self-awareness in their brain. So it depends on the context and your objective.
Is it right to say that when coaching during a session and during a game, it's more about guiding their attention towards the most important things, using cues instead of, what should I say, questions or long sentences?
Well, like I just said, in the situation, it is more about developing football actions. So developing football action is an interaction with the football context. So football interactions. Action, situation, action patterns. For example, in this situation, players should learn that they should pass. But in this situation, you should dribble. Yeah, so situation passing pattern, situation dribbling pattern. Yeah. If you want to develop those situation action patterns, then the coaching should be in the situation. That's also why you coach in the game. You want instant improvement of behavior. In the game, it is more about helping them to perform better. So then you want ideally instant improvement of behavior, instant improvement of situation action patterns. Hey, listen, they had a red card. They are now playing with 10. So before the red card, they press you, but now they drop back. So they are not pressing you. So now the pitfall is that you start to dribble because nobody's pressing you. But if you start dribbling, you give the other team more time to be compact with 10 players. You see? Yeah. So then that situation with nobody pressing is provoking dribbling. So situation dribbling. But what you want is, although nobody is pressing you, you want situation passing.
Yeah.
So that is instant improvement of situation action patterns, but more from the perspective of performing. But then afterwards, when you do a video session, it is more about learning, because you cannot win the game anymore because the game is over. So then it is more about storing knowledge in their brain. Yeah, so that is how I would define the difference between the two.
Yeah, I guess I should ask a better question. I was thinking more, I guess there should be a really high bar before taking the players out of what should I say, the zone, or them being present in the moment. So I'm asking a bit more about, in particular, how you should perform the coaching in the moment to not, for example, make them stop and look at you.
No, yeah, that's a different question, but an even more important question, I would say. Because the thing is, and that's probably also why you asked that question. The thing is that the more you talk to a player, the more you attract the attention of the player, and you activate the consciousness and the conscious thoughts of players. um, which will disrupt or might disrupt their unconscious football actions. Yeah. People often use the word flow or the zone, like you said, or focus or concentration. But these are all non-contextual jargon. And what people really mean is that you are performing football actions unconsciously without consciousness being activated or helping. Yes. Ideally, you want your players to play football unconsciously. Yes. Without consciousness disrupting them. Because conscious thoughts are, like I just said, conscious thoughts are often a negative thing when you play football. Because it slows you down. Yes. It delays your decision to, for example, pass the ball. Players are dribbling, and then conscious of the environment and who should I play the ball to. But the net result is that the moment of passing is delayed. And then, like I said, the other team has more time to be compact. So ideally, you are disrupting that flow or unconscious football actions as little as possible and only as much as necessary. And if you do coach them verbally, then at least make sure that you ask questions. Don't tell them, but ask them questions. Because the thing is, if I am telling you something, I am using my own words. But those words might not resonate with what is stored in your brain. So then you have less chance that it will stick. Yes, and there is more chance that I raise question marks, like what does he mean with that? Or what does that word mean? If I ask you questions, then what I make you do is answer, but in your own words. But you are going to use words that your brain is already familiar with. And you are going to answer my question based on information that is already stored in your brain. So then, by asking you that question and you answering that question in your words and based on the information that is already stored in your brain, that information is now going to be a hook in your memory. And then my message is going to stick to that hook. So I ask you a question, I activate a hook in your memory, and then my message is going to stick to that hook. While if I am just talking to you, I am not activating a hook. So now it is more difficult for my information to stick in your brain.
Yeah.
So if I activate this hook and then my message stick to that hook, yes, that is much more comfortable for your brain. And now there is less chance that I unnecessarily trigger question marks and conscious thoughts in your brain. So there is less chance that I am disrupting your unconscious football actions, your zone.
Yeah.
Does that make
How
sense?
do you? Yeah.
This explanatory theory?
Yeah. But how do you see this differing from kids? Let's say from they start when they're 4, and then more youth football, let's say from 12, 13, and then senior football. How do you see this in particular coaching differ between the ages?
Well, first of all, and that's again probably the reason why you asked that question. When you ask somebody questions and you force somebody to have conscious reflections, that is a function of the prefrontal cortex, this part of the brain. And the prefrontal cortex is relatively immature with young children. And then when children get older, until the age of, let's say, 22, 23, That is the moment that your prefrontal cortex is more or less matured. And with women, that is earlier in age than with men. So when you work with 6-year-olds or 8-year-olds or 10-year-olds, their prefrontal cortex is immature. So this ability for conscious reflections is relatively underdeveloped. Yes, because of that immature prefrontal cortex. So if you ask questions to these young children, then you should stick to relatively simple questions that require less conscious reflections. And then when youth players get older, and by the time they are, let's say, 13, 14 years old, that is also the moment that you can introduce tactical training as a training objective. Because then the prefrontal cortex also allows them to work together with other people. That is another function of the prefrontal cortex. Until that moment, you are more acting based on your impulses, so you are more selfish, like young children. But then when you are 12, 13, 14, you start to take other people into account, so then teamwork becomes relevant or possible. So until, let's say, between 6 and 12, 13 years old, situation coaching is dominant. So developing desired habits. In this situation, passing. In this situation, pressing. In this situation, dribbling. Yes? So situation coaching is dominant with younger children. And if you do reference coaching, asking questions, keep it simple. And then from the age of 12, 13, then the prefrontal cortex is still not matured, but at least it starts to be capable of having conscious reflections. And then you can introduce more complex reference coaching and video analysis, for example. So from a, let's say, long-term player development plan or trajectory, situation coaching in the early years with simple reference coaching. And then when they get older and the prefrontal cortex is more matured, you can do more and more complex reference coaching. Yeah, so in simple terms, that is how I would describe the difference between, like you asked, younger players and older youth players.
And if you go, let's say you go to a Premier League team, obviously there's one goal to win, but there's always talk about, okay, here it's about development, here it's about winning. But isn't there some logical fallacy here? If you develop, there's a bigger chance of winning, I'm guessing. Doesn't matter which level you're at. So how would you say that how you coach and how you design both sessions and game plans, how would you say that differs from what you just spoke about now and at the very highest level, if you understand my question?
Yeah, now let's give it a try. I think I understand what you mean. First of all, when people use words, yes, it is important that they are clear what they mean with it. Because football is by definition about winning. Even when somebody is 6 years old, when a 6-year-old child has the ball, he's going to try to score, right? And when his friend has the ball, he's going to try to get the ball. Yeah. So the net result, whether you like it or not, the net result of that behavior is that the 6-year-old child is going to try to score more goals than his friend. Whether the child is aware of it, or whether the child, or independent of whether the child cares about being successful or not, that is not what we are talking about. We are talking about the purpose of the game. So everybody who plays the game of football is trying to win. Yes. But yeah, some people don't care whether they succeed or not. Some people care whether they succeed or not. But that is the purpose of the participant. Yes. And that is something else than the purpose of the game. So the purpose of the game is by definition winning, independent of who you are and what your personal motives are. Yes. So that is the meaning of winning. Now, so then the question is, what do those people that you are referring to in your question, what do they mean with winning? Are they talking about when youth players are playing football? Or are they talking about the outcome of the game? Yeah, because that doesn't really matter in youth football. When you are a youth player, when you are on the pitch, you should always try to win, because that is the purpose of the game. But then when you step off the pitch, yeah, then it doesn't matter whether you succeeded or not in youth football. Yes. Until the age of, let's say, 15, 16. Because when you are developing players for the first team in professional football, yeah, in professional football, winning does not only matter when you are playing, winning also matters the moment you step off the pitch. Because in professional football, you get a salary, yes, and in return, you are expected to win games. So then the outcome matters. So that means that when youth players arrive at the first team, they must also know what it takes to win the games at all cost. And then, of course, at all cost, not in absolute terms, but in relative terms within the boundaries of the laws of the game, of course.
Yeah.
And also what it means to win competitions, so a series of games. Because sometimes the game itself, you want to protect a draw because that 1 point is important in the context, the bigger context of the competition. Yes. So in the last part of a youth academy, teaching players what it means to win the game is one of the competencies that they have to develop. So then it is not winning or developing, it is winning as part of developing. Player development means the development of competencies, and then no understanding what it takes to win a game is one of the competencies that you want to develop. So then it is development and winning. Winning being part of the development process. And basically what I've just done in the last 5 minutes is introducing and explaining definitions. Yes? Because, yeah, if you don't first define what winning means, and if you don't define how winning relates to development, if you don't have those definitions, then the discussion or the answer to your question is going all over the place.
Yeah.
just like it normally happens in football and in podcasts. So, based on these definitions, I have now tools to answer your question in a more reliable way. So, if you are preparing for a Premier League team, first team, then in the last part of a youth academy, you have to teach players what winning at all cost means, or what winning a game in the context of a competition of 30, 40 games means. So that by the time they are reaching the first team, they are ready to be a professional player who is paid to win games and to win trophies. Yeah, and that the first years of in the first team are not necessary to teach that. You see that learning should already take place in the last part of the youth academy. Yes. So this is a more, let's say, fundamental way of answering your question, and I can imagine that you want to go into a little bit more detail and more specific. So maybe rephrase your question or ask a follow-up question.
Yeah. You speak you speak a lot about intentions instead of instructions, and that making players more adaptable to different types of opponents, for example. And in the professional game, you obviously can scout your opponents, see all their games, etc., how they defend, how they attack, usually, if there are patterns. Would you say that, so just continuing on what I just asked before, would you say that if you do it this way, all the way through player development, using like basically the theory of evolution and developing players, when they get to the top, would you say that using intentions, for example, in how you coach players also at the senior level, would that mean that preparing for a Premier League game, that you have to a lesser amount, take into consideration how the opponent plays?
Now, this is a beautiful follow-up question because you are referring to an example of what it means to teach youth players in the last part of the academy, to teach them what it means to win games. So let's say until 15, yes, when they are on the pitch, they want to win. But if you zoom out, it is about them trying to develop into the best possible football player. So then until 15, you are basically not talking about the other team. But talking about the other team, that is a beautiful example of what you do in the last part of the youth academy when you are conditioning unconscious brains to understand what it means to win games, because then they should learn to play in a different way in different games, or maybe even play in a different way in the second half. You see? So taking the other team into account is one of the things that you have to learn. That is one of the competencies that you have to develop as part of learning to win games at all cost. So yeah, that's a beautiful practical example. Yeah. But unfortunately, coaches are already doing that with 12-year-olds. Yes. Or, and that is an even bigger problem worldwide, is that coaches are using the very popular word game model that you are also familiar with, and principles of play with 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds. And this is the new flavor of the month, game models, principles of play. But in reality, it is the new cancer that is spreading. Yeah. Because there are a lot of, and you see that also on social media, there are a lot of coaches and they have a game model and they identify and profile themselves with their game model and their principles of play. But you know what? These coaches, they go from team to team and they go from club to club and they take their game model with them. You know what the consequence is? That basically what they are saying is, my game model is the starting point of reasoning. My game model is the objective. And everywhere I work, independent of the players that I work with and their abilities and inabilities, they all have to adapt to my game model. And obviously they will make some adjustments maybe, but still everybody has to adapt to the game model. Yeah, and that's also what federations these days teach. But you know what football coaches really should do and what they should learn? That you don't take your game model as a starting point and then your players have to adapt to the game model. No, what you should do is you work with a new team. You analyze the players that you work with. You evaluate what their abilities are and their inabilities are. And then you say, okay, given this group of players, this is the best way to play. Yeah, so that we can benefit from their strengths, their abilities, and that we can cover up the inabilities. Yes. So everywhere you go, there is a totally different way of playing, a totally different formation, maybe. Yes. That is what a good coach can do. But unfortunately, yeah, you have all these youth coaches. They have their game model. First of all, the word game model is philosophically incorrect because the game of football cannot be modeled. Yes, it cannot be modeled. So the word model is already philosophically incorrect. Yes. Your team can have a way of playing. Yeah, but that is your team. Yeah. But if you talk about the game, you talk about the game as a whole. But then you also have the other team, and the other team is unpredictable. You cannot model the other team. Yes. So the moment that you use the word game, you talk about both teams. But you cannot model what the other team is doing. So to use the word game and to use the word model is philosophically incorrect. Yeah, but yeah, remember how we started this conversation? Only if you have philosophical, critical thinking based on arguments, then you understand this. But if you have very superficial thinking in your comfort zone based on subjective opinions, then the word game model is not a red flag in your brain. You see? So the term itself is incorrect. But secondly, the application of one playing style independent of your players is also incorrect, even at the highest level. Because you know what you often see? That a club, a Premier League club, has a certain squad, then they hire a coach, and then the coach wants to play 1-3-4-3, so with a back three. But if you look at the squad, they don't have the players to play with a back three. But still he's going to play with a back three. You know what that means? That first of all, the club has players that represent millions of euros, but they are useless in the 1-3-4-3 system. So you throw money out of the window, and the club is going to spend millions of euros to be able to play 1-3-4-3. Yes. So what you would expect is that a club has a certain squad and that they hire somebody to manage that squad. And he's going to work with the cards that he's dealt. So he's going to work with the players that he has. So now he has to develop a playing style given those players.
Yeah.
This metaphor. You have Apple, and Apple makes iPhones, yes? And then Apple is hiring a CEO that is managing the process of iPhones, right? But try to imagine this. They hire a new CEO, and the CEO doesn't like mobile phones. The new CEO likes refrigerators. So you know what the CEO says? I forget about the phones. We are going to make refrigerators, the iFridge. So forget about the iPhone. Let's do iFridge. And this ridiculous metaphor will make people smile, and they immediately understand that is never going to happen with Apple, right?
Yeah.
But in football, you have this squad with these abilities and these inabilities. So maybe they are better to play 1-4-2-3-1, for example. And then they hire this new coach, and the coach is an expert in 1-3-4-3. But that squad is not ideal for that. But they just allow it to happen. And they lose hundreds of millions of euro in terms of value of players. Now, so even at the highest level, it is very strange that coaches have one way of playing, and then the players have to adapt to that.
Yeah.
And it's even worse at a lower level, because if you hire an under 13 coach and he has a game model, do you now understand that that game model is probably not going to be ideal for 12-year-old children and their abilities and inabilities? But this under 13 coach is supposed to help these players develop. But he forces those players to adapt to a playing style that is not ideal for them. Do you now understand that that is probably going to have negative influences on their development as a player? So that is game model. And then you have principles of play. But you know what in reality they are? Instructions. They are not principles of play. So like fundamental principles of the sport. They are instructions. Yeah. So this coach is treating those under 13 players as like robots. And I give you an example. Just imagine, Alexander, you have the ball. You are a center back and I'm a striker. Yes? And our coach has introduced the principle of play, exploiting numerical superiority in midfield, or exploiting overload in midfield when we are attacking. So I am a striker, I am dropping into the midfield, and my opponent is not following. You are now communicating around you through the glasses of, hey, is there somewhere a numerical superiority, right? In other words, is there a free teammate? And then you make eye contact with me and you see that I am totally free. So you play the ball to me, the striker, and now we have exploited numerical superiority in midfield, right? So our coach is going to be so proud of us. Oh, look at my players. This is what we practice on Wednesday. And oh, look at this game model. And oh, look at these principles of play. And oh, we are so good. And basically, he says, I am so good. 5 minutes later, 5 minutes later, I am dropping into the midfield again when you have the ball. But my opponent, the opposing center back, remembers what happened 5 minutes ago. So now my opponent is following me. You are making eye contact with me again, but now you see that my opponent is next to me. So I have not created numerical superiority. What are you now going to do? You are going to look somewhere else, right? And then maybe you're going to play the ball to the right midfielder who is free. Oh, we have created numerical superiority again in midfield. But could it be that although my opponent followed me, that I am still the best progress option when you play the ball to my left foot and I keep my body between my opponent and the ball? Could it be that I am still the best passing option? Yes or no? Yeah. What should you as a center back, 12 years old, 13 years old, what should you learn? To play the ball to the best passing option, whether my opponent is here or not? Or should you learn to play the ball to a teammate who is free? What is your answer?
The best progress option.
Yes. Yeah. Do you now see that our coach, with his principle of play, in this case, exploiting numerical superiority, overload in midfield, do you now see that he is negatively influencing the development of your decision making?
Yeah.
You become a less competent football player. Your game inside, your decision making is developing less. And our coach is calling it a principle of play, but in reality, it is an instruction. He is treating you like a robot. But youth players should not learn to play the ball to a teammate who is free. Youth players should learn to play the ball to the best passing option and the best progress option. And ideally, that is somebody who is closer to the opposing goal. Yes? And when my opponent is following and I cannot keep my body between my opponent and the ball, yeah, then I am not a good passing option. And then you might consider the right midfield player, right? But first you're going to consider me. Yes. Now, and this is why I use the word cancer, because it is spreading around the football world in youth football like a cancer. Yes. Because game model, the word is incorrect. First of all, a coach should not have a game model and then all the players adapting to them, and then their abilities and inabilities might not be ideal for that game model. No, the coach should develop a playing style based on his players. The players are the objective. The playing style is a tool. Yes. But all these coaches have a game model. So then their game model is the objective. And the players, whoever they are, and whatever their abilities and inabilities, are a tool to perform his game model. That's the world upside down. And then they talk about principles of play. But in reality, they are just instructions, yeah, to treat your players like robots, like soldiers. And as a result, you are developing bad decision makers. And then you know what? All these players, when they are 18, you know what coaches of the first team are complaining about? A lack of creative players. In other words, a lack of exceptional decision makers. Yeah, why do you think that is? Because between the age of 6 and 18, these players are treated like robots by all these youth coaches who, with their game model and their principles of play, who want to control what is happening on the pitch because they want to win. Yes? Now, and that is why I call it a cancer. And hopefully, with conversations like this, it will make people start to think. All the game models out of the window, all the principles of play out of the window. You look at the players in front of you, and as a coach, you must have the knowledge and the ability, so apply the knowledge, to analyze, okay, these are the abilities, the strengths, and these are the inabilities, the weaknesses of my players. And then you start to work with that. And then you start to develop a way of playing that is going to help these players further improve their strengths and also improve their weaknesses. Yes, that is what youth coaches should do. Yeah, and now hopefully, with my explanations and with my examples, I have explained it clear enough.
Yeah. Running out of time, but one last thing. If you reflect on everything you've said, would you stand by a statement that players or football players should be specialists and specialize pretty early, and coaches should be more generalists and have a broad education to make sure that they are able to bring into the football world all the most important knowledge there is to specialize their players even better?
So, if I reflect on your question, are you talking about whether football players should start playing football at an early age and just play football, or whether they should do multiple sports at an early age? Is that what your question is about?
Yes.
Now, again, you have to critically evaluate that discussion, because what you see in this discussion worldwide about multiple sports at an early age and then only specialize later on, that discussion takes place based on a lot of incorrect and false arguments. Yes, but those arguments sound logical to a lot of people. Yes, because there are players who did multiple sports when they are young, but then gradually they became professional football players. Yes, so those examples are there, and those examples are also used to prove the point that youth players should do multiple sports at an early age. But what these people don't tell is what is happening behind the scenes, and everything that is not visible to the outside world. If you look at all the players who have become professional player, yes, some of them did multiple sports when they were young, but you know what? Many, 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 many more became professional football player without doing other sports. Yes? So that is already a fact. So many, 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 many more players became a professional football player by only playing football. So that already puts it in perspective, right? So then using the players who did multiple sports as an example, yeah, that argument is already out of the window. Secondly, if you play football, but then besides football, you'd also do several other sports, you know what the risk is? That the more sports you play, the more activities you have every week, the less recovery time you have between activities. Now, that means that you start the next activity without being fully recovered from the previous activity. If you do that over time, you will accumulate fatigue. Now, what is the consequence of accumulating fatigue? Is that your nervous system becomes slower. So the signal from your brain to your muscles arrives later. So then, for example, you are decelerating, and then ideally the muscles around your knee contract to stabilize your knee. But if the signal from your brain to your knee muscles has not arrived yet, but you already are decelerating, then the muscles around your knee have not contracted yet. So your knee is not stabilized yet during the deceleration. So then your upper leg and your lower leg start to move in relation to each other. And then you snap your ACL. Now, that's what you see a lot in youth sport these days, that more and more players have an ACL, and also at a younger and younger age. Yeah. This is like a pandemic, for example, in the USA. The other thing, so this is from an injury point of view, so that youth players at a young age have more and more ACL. So then that reduces the chance that you will become a professional player. Yeah, you can still become a professional player, but the chance has decreased because it also damages other parts of your knee, like your cartilage and other parts. So it might be a weak link for the rest of your career. So that's from an injury point of view. Also from a performance or development point of view, a slower nervous system is a problem because you start to execute your decisions. So you start to perform your actions slower and slower. And the accuracy of your actions will be less. But you know what? When you want to become a professional player and you want to go to a higher and higher level, the main characteristic of a higher level of play is that you have less space and time. So you must learn to adapt to less space and time. But if you have a slower nerve system, your football actions become slower rather than faster, which is necessary with less time. Your actions become less accurate instead of more accurate, which is necessary with less space. So less space and time means more accurate and more faster actions, which is the opposite of what happens when you accumulate fatigue with slower and less accurate actions. So if you do multiple sports, the more activities you have during the week, less time between actions, less recovery, bigger chance of fatigue at the start of the next activity, higher injury risk, less development. So as a result, yes, you will have more players who will drop out before they become a professional player, either because of injury or because their development is not fast enough. And all those players are not part of those studies that are used to prove that multiple sports is an advantage, increases the chance of becoming a professional player. Yes. So to summarize, there are studies that pretend that when you do multiple sports, you have an increased chance of becoming a professional football player. And then as a result, parents are putting their children on multiple sports to increase the chance of their child becoming a professional player, for example. But what all these studies don't tell these parents is that there are many, many, many more players who became professional player without multiple sports. Yeah, so that is already strange. And those studies are not telling you all these players who had the potential to become a professional player, but who did not reach that potential, either because of injury, accumulation of fatigue, because of too many activities per week, or because their development slowed down when they are 14 or 15 or 16 maybe, because accumulation of fatigue slowed down their actions, which is the opposite of what you want with less space and time. So then at some point the coach says, yeah, you are not good enough. But in reality, they still have the potential, but they are just too tired to adapt to less space and time. So all these players are also not part of those studies. You see? So the thing is that you should not do multiple sports to develop youth players with motoric development, because you only need the motoric development that is functional in football. You see? You, as a football player, you don't have to develop the motor abilities, so the coordination, that you don't use in football. So you only have to develop the coordination, the motor abilities that you need as a professional player. Yeah. So basically that means that you should not do only 4 against 4, or only 7 against 7, or only 11 against 11, because then you have one-dimensional motoric development, and then certain motor abilities that you need as a professional football player and that you develop in 4 against 4 are underdeveloped. But if there is more than enough variation within football training, you will develop all the motor abilities that you need to develop as a professional football player. And you are not wasting time when you are playing tennis or basketball or whatever. You are not wasting time developing motor abilities that you will never ever use as a football player. You see? So, and look, you can go into more detail and more arguments and more explanations and more examples, but in a nutshell, these are the main arguments that you can use for people who suggest, who pretend that multiple sports at a young age is increasing the chance to become a professional football player. Because every minute that you play tennis is 1 minute less playing football. Yes? And 1 minute less playing football is 1 minute less becoming a better communicator with your teammates, or a better decision maker, or a better executor of decisions. You see? So, if there are ever, and I know that you have also been in discussions about this with people in Norway, yes. And look, these people are experts in their own area, so that's not the point. But the thing is that these people should critically evaluate their own arguments and ask themselves the question, what about all these players who reach the top without multiple sports, because that is this much, and the multiple sport players is this much? Did I investigate how many children were overloaded because of multiple sports and they dropped out because of injury. But had they only played football and then there is less activity per week, so lower risk of injury, they might have fulfilled their potential. So why have I not investigated those players? Now, etc., etc. So hopefully, again, with the explanatory theory and the examples that I gave and the arguments that I used, hopefully this is useful for that discussion, and also for parents to decide for themselves what is best for their child, rather than listening to people who are supposed to be experts about multiple sports. But first of all, they are not telling the whole story. And secondly, they are also not telling about all the things they did not investigate. Yes? So good luck, Alexander, with that discussion in Norway.
Yeah. Raymond, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Tusen takk for at du hørte på Bendiksen Airways. Dersom du har tips, kommentarer eller vil gi en vurdering av episoden, så gjør gjerne det. Det setter jeg stor pris på.